Hello, and welcome to the Green Team of the Legendarium, the weird little spin-off podcast where the patrons get together to discuss the books and topics the main crew haven't gone around to yet. I'm Little Red Book, and tonight I have with me the romance lover from the land down under, Mirlya.
Hi.
And the mysterious lady who housed my babies, BefuddledPanda.
Hello.
And the man who graduated from the Matrix to marriage, Mr. Anderson.
Hi.
We are going to be discussing The Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas. Was that correct?
Yes.
Maas.
Close enough.
And I am co-opting this for my third installment of Red Reads Romance with Green Team members and their partners. So there you go. We will be talking about general impressions with ample warning before we get into spoilers. But this is a fairy tale retelling, so just generally overall, if you've ever read one, you kind of know how this is going to work out. Panda, you prepared a little thing about the author.
Yeah, I figured we would just give a little overview about the author since she's kind of important in some of the things we'll be talking about, I think. So Sarah J. Maas is the author of several fantasy series. There's Throne of Glass, there's A Court of Thorns and Roses, which is the first book that we'll be discussing today, and Crescent City. Her books have sold over 12 million copies and are highly popular with the YA fantasy and romance readers. Early in her writing career, which I did not know this, she faced many criticisms because she wrote fantasy and was told by her creative writing workshop teacher that fantasy wasn't real storytelling. But
Boo.
she has proved those critics wrong as she consistently tops best-selling lists week after week. She has a fierce following of fans, which, if any of you are listening, don't come after us, please. And signed a new 4-book deal with Bloomsbury earlier this year. Maas has become a household name among fantasy romance readers, and this is my first time reading her, so we'll see how it goes.
She's more than a household name among fantasy romance readers. She's a household name amongst romance readers as well.
Oh,
That's
really?
true. Yes.
Good for her. So, quick question, Mr. Anderson. How much romance do you read?
Not much. So how I got here was I heard good things about Maas. I heard good things about this book. I knew nothing about them. And when I told Panda, I think I'm going to read this Court of Thorn and Roses, she started giggling. And so she said, well, let's wait and read it together, and then it became this episode. So that's kind of how I came into this story, if you will. But no, I do not read much romance.
I was so surprised because I was asking, what are you going to read next? He was like, well, the next thing on my list is A Court of Thorns and Roses. I was like, why? How did you find out about this book? And he was like, yeah, I just know that people say it's really good. And I was like, what kind of people? Like, where did you hear this? Because this is not something that I thought you would pick up on your own. And here we are.
Here we are. And again, it's not, I don't even know where I heard it. It's just kind of, I don't know, hearing around people also talk about her because she is such a household name and this series.
This is also my first time reading her, so I was pleasantly surprised. I'm going to say mean things later.
I am a Sarah J. Maas fan, so I read this when it came out.
Oh, nice. She's an OG. You're the only one here who really has any credibility amongst the listeners who are her fans.
All I have to say is that you have to start somewhere, right?
That's true.
Mm-hmm.
So what are your general thoughts on the story?
Oh, do you want to give a quick premise?
Oh, yes.
A quick premise of this book that we're discussing in this episode, A Court of Thorns and Roses. So, in a world where Fae and humans coexist, there's animosity and tension between the two. Fae finds herself imprisoned in the Fae realm after killing a wolf in the woods. She soon discovers there's a growing blight in the Fae realm, and her captor has a key role to play in stopping its spread. And as you mentioned, Red, this is a retelling of the Ballad of Tamlin, which is also inspired by, this story is also inspired by Beauty and the Beast.
It's also inspired by east of the sun, west of the moon.
That makes a lot of sense.
I know I've read
Um,
that at some point, but I'm trying to remember. I got some Snow Queen vibes from it.
Yeah.
I was watching a video where Sarah J. Maas went through her inspirations for this book. And there were actually a few. So there was the retellings, as well as apparently the initial premise came to her when she was listening to some music for the soundtrack for Princess Mononoke.
Oh,
And she just started forming this story in her head. But
nice.
she also tries to capture a lot of fairy mythology and mythology from around the world.
That was the thing I enjoyed second most about this story.
I
Is
really like that. Yeah, the
all
world.
the interweaving. Yeah.
Mhm.
So what are your general thoughts about this story, and what did you expect going into this book, Mr. Anderson?
Overall, I liked a lot of it. Some things less so. Overall, I did enjoy it. Particularly at the beginning and the end had me very hooked in what was going on. The overall plot, again, it was kind of this middle part I didn't like, where they kind of forgot the plot and some of the characters kind of changed. The overall plot I thought was kind of interesting. Again, kind of a retelling of stories we know. The world building, I would have liked a lot more of that. I thought it was kind of interesting. Then the romance stuff I thought was fine. It's not. By the way, Panda reacted when I mentioned it. I was expecting a very explicit book, and it's not
Romance
quite
just
that
it's not
explicit.
hot.
No. And so overall, it seemed like that seemed fine to me. It didn't seem like I think I only laughed at one part during some of that, but most of it seemed fine. So yeah, overall, I kind of enjoyed it.
Well, Panda, what did you think?
So I enjoyed it more than I thought I would. I mean, like, again, I've never read Sarah J. Maas. I've only like heard other people's take on her. Um, I I knew that her books were a bit more or more romance heavy, but for this one, like, there is romance and it is a pretty critical part of the plot, but there was so much more going on, especially getting introduced to the world and the history of the Fae, um, like I guess species. I don't know what you would call them, the Fae people, and the humans. And overall, like I did enjoy the majority of it, and then there were parts that were just like, okay, this is pretty dumb, and it was a disappointment. And we'll get into that in the spoilers part. But overall, it was fun. Like it was a nice, quick read.
That was pretty much my reaction as well. It I was expecting a lot more schlock.
Yeah,
It actually has some depth to it
yeah.
that surprised me, and pleasantly so. But I'm kind of with you. There are some parts that are just kind of dumb or not boring exactly, but like, why are we spending so much time on this? And her prose gets a little purpley.
Uh-huh.
But what I really appreciated it about this story is how the relationships evolve throughout the
Mm.
book. So we can't talk about it without spoilers. So I'm just going to say that. Okay, Mirlya, tell us why we're wrong.
It's entitled to their own opinions of the books. I mean, I enjoyed it, but when I read it back in 2015 when it was published, I had already read three or four of her books already. So I'm going to struggle a little bit to articulate exactly what I like about the series, because what I like about the series actually happens in later books.
Mm.
So there is a lot in this book that sets up for the later series. And when I originally read this, thinking that it was a Beauty and the Beast retelling, I could see the Beauty and the Beast retelling part of the story, but I didn't realize how well it actually sets up the trilogy for the rest of what comes. Because there's little things that she's added into the book that are important later on
Okay.
that you don't realize are important.
Yeah,
I mean,
can
that's fair.
I can see that there's definitely some breadcrumb laying going on in the story. Like, I don't know what exactly is going to pan out or not, but I can feel it. I mean, the plot wise, I think for the most part, it's very well laid out and thoughtful. So on a scale of 1 to 10 or 1 to 5 stars, how would you rate this?
3.5. I think for me it's a 3.5. It's like it's not bad. like overall, and it was entertaining, and I see like potential and promise. And I did enjoy the most part. I did have some trouble with like the pacing of it for the first like good chunk of the book. And then once it got exciting, I was like, okay, this is cool. And then there was like this twist, and I was like, okay, da 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 da. But I think her strongest part was just the creativity in creating the world, the creatures, and then everything else was like, okay.
I'm going to go with a 3 because of what I said about her prose. Like, if I had to hear about bones barking and teeth singing, and just she has these weird quirks in her writing that I laughed at things I was not supposed to be laughing at. And I'm not saying she's a bad writer. She's not. And I think the plot is really cohesive. There's some pacing issues, but there's some things about her writing that anyway.
I think I gotta give it a 3 as well. There's things I really liked, and then things I really didn't like. And I think that kind of averages out to a 3.
Mm.
Yeah.
Is this a 5-star book for you, Mirlya?
It was when I first read it. On a reread of it, and having read the rest of the series, it's one of the weaker books of the series.
So, quick question. How did you relate to the idea of reading it for the fact that we're going to be talking about it here in a podcast versus you're just going to read a book? Did that affect it, do you think, your rating?
I don't think so.
Okay. I was just curious because it does affect me when I'm reading a book.
I think
because I'm reading this really. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
For me, because like, I was thinking of, okay, what are the things I could say about this book? But really what I wanted to do is I just want to read it for enjoyment, because this is definitely something that, like, if you're kind of in a reading slump, or you just want something that is like quicker to read, very entertaining, like this, for me, it hit the spot once like I got through a part of the beginning, and then the pace just picked up, and like I devoured the rest of the book, mostly because I wanted to know how was this story going to end.
Right. And that's why I always read books twice when I'm going to review them, because the first time I read the book, I just want to enjoy the book.
Enjoy it.
Yeah. And not think about things. I mean, I will think about things a little bit, but I try and put that on hold. So I was just curious. How would you rate this against other Sarah Maas books? And only one of us can answer this question.
Mirlya. Well, she did say this was like the weaker book of the series.
Yeah. So we kind of already answered that one. Sorry.
So this book was written originally in 2009, apparently.
Oh.
And it was, like I said, it was published. It was her 5th published book, and she has written a significant number more books since then. And her books keep getting longer and longer and longer.
And notice that we saw the box set of this series today, and I just see these books keep expanding. And
isn't that like a rule in fantasy novels, though?
Seems to be.
Has to be
if you don't double the page count, why are you even writing a sequel?
But how much has her writing changed, do you think?
There are sections of her writing that I think have stayed the same, and I think that I don't know whether or not it's because she has become such a popular author, but I almost feel like her editors just kind of go, oh yeah, that's fine, and just let it go. And so there's a couple of sections in some of her newer books that are, massive, that it's just sort of filler sections that I probably could have been edited out, but everyone loves her stories, so they just keep them in.
I can think of 2 other authors that I would fit into that category. Just off the top of my head, Stephen King and Brandon Sanderson. Robert Jordan probably fits in there too, where like he just needs somebody to say no.
Yeah.
Yeah. Victim of your own success. Okay, moving into spoilers. Panda, I believe you have a recap for us.
Oh, okay. Yes. All right. Bear with me here to jog our memory. So we meet Fair. Is it Farah or something?
Farah.
Yeah,
I was saying it as Farah.
Farah.
She's actually there's a pronunciation thing right at the very start.
Okay.
It's one of the times when you walk into a fantasy book and they actually have someone pronounce the name for you in the dialogue.
It's always nice.
Rhysand I always want to say Rysand, though.
I
It's
hear
Reese.
Well, I listened to that.
Rysand. Okay. We meet Farah, the main character, hunting in the woods. Winter is harsh and food is scarce, especially for the poor and broke families such as hers. She finds herself in luck and kills a deer as well as a monstrous wolf. Farah drags her bounty home to feed her starving sisters and father. Unbeknownst to her, the wolf is not just any wolf, but a fae, and the ruler of the Spring Court, Tamlin, comes calling for retribution. To save her family, Farah agrees to be exiled in the fairy realm and live with her fae captor, where she meets more fae like Lucien and Elise. I think that's how you say it. Ever the fighter, Farah is constantly trying to escape and reunite with her family despite her captor's reassurance that her family is taken care of. Little by little, Farah learns more about the Fae realm and the history between Fae and humans. She also learns of a blight spreading across the realm, thinning the boundaries between the Fae courts, allowing dangerous demons to enter the Spring Court. During the Great Rite of the Kalanmai, aka Fire Night, Farah runs into Rhysand from the Night Court, who later turns out to be more helpful than evil. She also has a heated encounter with Tamlin that ignites her burn for him. We'll talk about that later. Eventually, Farah learns about Amarantha, the queen of the Night Court, who had been wooing Tamlin with poor results. So Amarantha cursed Tamlin and turned his heart into stone. She gave him 49 years to find a human who hated the Fae but would be willing to marry him. If he does not complete this in time, she would enslave his entire court. With the 49 years coming to an end, Tamlin sends Farah back to her family in the human world because he didn't think she would want to marry him in time. But Farah finds her way back to the Spring Court and learns almost everything she needs to know from Elise, so she journeys to the Night Court to save Tamlin. Upon arriving at the Night Court, Amarantha makes a bet with Farah to either solve her riddle or survive 3 challenges in order to save Tamlin. Long story short, Farah completes the 3 challenges with help from Lucien and Rhysand and solves the riddle to break Amarantha's hold on Tamlin. Tamlin exacts his revenge and everyone imprisoned in the Night Court was saved. Farah and Tamlin become official and enjoy some sexy times.
I mean, they enjoyed some sexy times before they were official,
That's
too.
true, but yeah.
Yeah.
I can only put so much in this summary.
Yeah. So, how does this Beauty and the Beast retelling stack up for you guys? So, I'm going to tell you my initial thoughts. It was interesting to me that it took what went on in the Disney movie and kind of turned it on its head. So, like, she's illiterate.
Yeah.
And she's lost her education because of her family's loss of fortune. And I found that really interesting. Also, the Disney story leaves out the sisters, and this one does have the sisters in, which is in the original fairy tale. And overall, I think it does a pretty good job of being a Beauty and the Beast retelling with a whole lot of Tamlin thrown in. So I don't know if you guys are familiar with Tamlin.
I was not. Like, I did not know at all about Tamlin.
Tamlin is a Irish fairy tale where a fairy queen kidnaps a man, and the only way the woman can get her man back from the fairy queen is when their procession rides by, she has to hold on to him no matter what, and like physically hold on to him. And the fairy queen turns him into all these terrible, horrible things that are hurting her. And then eventually that's how the curse is broken. So I thought it was a really good melding of those 2 stories. Anyway, other thoughts?
I thought, yeah, like, to me, the Beauty and the Beast stuff really stood out because that's the one that I know the most, like, I'm the most familiar with. And I did really enjoy the scene where, you know, he shows her the library. Like, that part was really vivid and I could, like, imagine it. I was like, okay, this is my fantasy. I think that's the thing, is like this whole story is like it's kind of fan fiction-y. And but it's like polished enough where it's like, okay, I can read this as a professionally written book. But there are just elements of it I'm just like, okay, this is getting quite, quite like fan fiction. And that moment is one of them. I think the Beast part, like, so they all have these like masks that are stuck on their faces because of this curse, right? And I thought that was like okay. It was not like really that interesting to me. And it was just like, oh, sure, you can't see his face. All you can see is like his eyes. And, the beast is supposed to be like really scary, but I guess because he's like so big and powerful, and that's like the beast part, plus that he's
Mm.
Fae.
And he can turn into a beast, like a literal.
That's true. Yeah, he has his shape-shifting abilities. So, yeah, I thought there were some elements that were really well done, and then the rest is like, kind of same old, same old.
It felt a little more, I guess, authentic, at least their relationship, than like that 90s Disney magic thing, where over the course of one catchy song, the characters fall in love.
But in fairness, that song was over a space of time.
Right.
It was like a montage.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
I,
like a
I
few
should say,
days.
I love these Disney movies, but that is kind of how it happens in there, and this was, this is a little more organic. You get a deeper look into their building the relationship.
This is where you need to watch like Belle's Enchanted Christmas, to
Yeah.
get like the more in-depth
I don't
story
have
of
to watch more movies to understand a movie. That's not how movies work.
I saw a lot of complaints, and we touched on this before, but that Tamlin wasn't ugly enough to be the Beast. Like, he wasn't actually a beast. I don't know that really matters for the purpose of the story.
I think there were other elements that make him the
yeah.
beast, which like I mentioned,
Well,
and it's like, I mean, he's Fae. That's pretty
he
much
is.
the main thing.
He's also definitely that, like, kind of, at least in this book, definitely kind of like that generically perfect person. Like, everything he does is right no matter what.
Yeah.
Um,
But also grumpy.
he is a bit grumpy.
He's pretty grumpy.
Especially in the beginning. Again, that's what, when they first get to the court and he's like, doing those awkward beast things like they also had in the movie. I thought that was just funny. I'm trying to like ask her to, I forget what it was, to like eat with them or go for a walk or whatever.
He's also like Wolverine.
Yeah.
His claws will like
Totally.
come out. Yeah. Mirlya, what do you think?
I thought that it was quite a good retelling. The thing that I like about the Beauty and the Beast story is the whole concept that the person, or the female who gets taken captive, for want of a better word, falls in love with the beast not because of what they look like, but because of what they do together. And I think that this captured that quite well. Being in Feyre's head makes it, you can kind of see the parts where she's like, oh, okay, he's not as bad as I thought he was originally.
Mm-hmm.
And starts to piece together a few things. So it doesn't quite have the whole Stockholm syndrome that some other Beauty and the Beast retellings have, because, I mean, she brings it up at one point. He never actually treated her like a captive, other than the fact that now she can't go home.
Right.
And he gives her a lot of freedom. He gives her a horse, and she can just go riding if she wants to. And she, so there's that. So my thought on why this story exists, like not just Beauty and the Beast, is you think about if you live in a culture where there are arranged marriages and you're sent off to marry this man who you probably have never met before. And it's really scary. That would be a scary thing. And then getting to know that person and finding love. That's kind of what I think this story is addressing. Also, the fact that men are scary in general. I don't mean like, just like being a woman alone with a man can be a scary thing.
That is true, yes.
And also the idea of women taming men and civilizing them is all kind of wrapped up in this story. So anyway, those are my thoughts. What do you think of the curse?
I was a little confused, but it seemed to have a lot of parts to it. Like a lot of sub-clauses to this curse.
So, okay, I think one of my main criticisms of this book is that it did feel to me that the author had like specific things, specific scenes that she wanted to write. She wanted this character to do X, Y, Z, and this is something that she wanted to portray. And then she kind of filled in the rest to make it so that those scenes would happen. And to me, like the curse, I mean, I don't know if she came up with the curse first or she was like, you know what, these are specific scenes I want to write. And how do I make this curse so that, I can write these scenes? So to me, the curse was like kind of cheesy.
So one of the things that I struggled with is traditionally fairies, when they make a bargain, they have to keep them,
Hmm.
which she addresses. But technically, the curse is broken when Vera shows up at the queen's house. The curse is already broken, and she just cheats. And I realize that's part of also Fae culture. It felt like
A lot
she
of
just
plot
wanted to have those
manipulation.
trials. She wanted to have those
Yeah,
trials.
that's what I'm
That's
saying.
yes, exactly. So yeah, I guess I'm with you, Panda, on that.
So
Although I liked the trials, they were fun.
Yeah.
the reason the curse wasn't broken when she shows up is because the time that was allotted had already passed.
The 49 years.
Had I felt like that was kind of okay. I'll give that to you. It's still dumb because she already loved him before the 49 years.
Well, the thing is, like, Farah, like, almost said it, right? She had almost, like, broken the curse, but Tamlin was the one who was like, we don't have time for this. Like, she's not gonna do this. I only have 3 days left. I need to get her as far away from here because Amarantha, if she finds out, like, she's gonna kill Farah and then, he'll be heartbroken. And I mean,
He ruins it.
right, and like, Lucian Mass like, brings this up, but with like Lucian being like, oh, because they can't tell her the details of the curse at the time, right? But there's like little hints and stuff, and Lucian's just like, you couldn't give a few more days, like, what's the harm in that? So, there were specific things where she was just like, all right, let me just make it, let me raise the stakes here, but it didn't feel as realistic, like believable. It's one of those kind of like miscommunication kind of tropes.
I think that is actually a semi-important characterization of Tamlin that is important for what
For
happens
future,
next.
because he's very protective and overly protective.
Yes.
Yeah, that's fair. Still makes it a little frustrating for the reader.
So, I want to talk a little bit about how relationships evolve throughout the book, and this is the thing that I found the best feature of the book, and it has actually nothing to do with Tamlin and Farah, but how her relationships evolve with her family, with Lucian, and with other characters. One of the things I really appreciated about it is Nesta, I believe, is the oldest sister's name. You kind of hate her at the beginning of the book.
Yeah.
And then you realize that Nesta is the only person who was, one, able to resist the glamour, and two, actually came looking for Farah.
Hmm.
And how they interact, and how, like, they're never going to be besties, right? But they evolve a respect for each other. And I just really appreciated that part, probably because I had a difficult relationship with my sister. And the same with her and Lucian. Like, Lucian resents her at the beginning, and then slowly they develop a close friendship. And I really enjoyed that part of the book. Thoughts? Or am I
I
just...
really thought that there was going to be a bigger love triangle.
I'm glad there wasn't, honestly.
That was my expectation. I mean, like, that's not to say, in the sequels there wouldn't be, but because I think there are going to be. But yeah, it wasn't as prominent in this book.
I agree with the Lucian stuff. I thought that was just a really interesting dynamic between two of them, just from how it started to how it went throughout the book and everything. And I'm also glad that didn't turn, at least in this book, romantic in any way. Aira seemed to have enough going on in that part of her life without adding more to it right now. I didn't really care for her family all that much. I like that we got some like closure with her sister and things at that one part, but overall they just kind of felt like, I don't know, they just felt like they were there.
Boring.
Yeah.
Definitely definitely her father and the middle sister were there. They were there, especially her dad. It was like,
Yeah, like
like, could you actually have a dad who's like, I don't know, trying to be a dad as opposed to like,
But I
I
think
don't
that
know.
was the point,
I know it
right?
was, but it just like, even when things turned around in his life, he didn't
Yeah.
ever get better.
Part of what was like a bit boring for me towards the beginning of the book was just like how much like the author was trying to portray Farah as this like really lonely, you know, character who just has like this whole burden on her shoulders. She has this vow to her mother to like keep her family safe and protect them. It was like, I get it. Okay? Like, can we move on to the good stuff? Like, there was just a lot of time spent on like really hammering that in, and that was boring. But there is one part that I highlighted in the book that I did appreciate. And I'll read a bit of it. So it says, and this is like towards the beginning. So I truly was to live there forever. So this is after she's been taken to the Fey realm. As much as I longed to ensure that Tamlin's word about caring for my family was true, as much as his claim that I was taking better care of my family by staying away, even if I was truly fulfilling that vow to my mother by staying in Prithian, without the weight of that promise, I was left hollow and empty. And I thought that that was so much better of a way to portray like this character of Farah than like all these other words that she used before this, because basically what she's saying is that her whole identity for so many years was, I am the protector of this family. And now that that burden is lifted from her, right? Like all she has to do is stay away from her family. Like she doesn't need to physically be there to protect them. She's like, I don't know what my purpose is anymore. Like I don't know how to function, because every minute of her waking, every waking moment she was thinking of like, okay, where am I going to find food, right? How am I going to clothe us? How am I going to, keep us safe and warm, and everything. And now, like, she actually gets to just focus on herself. And she's like, I don't know what to do with that. And to me, I relate to that a bit because I'm definitely more of a person who's like, I don't like to be the center of attention, in the way where it's like, oh, everybody is just like admiring you or whatever. Like I'm more of a behind the scenes kind of person. I'm like making things happen, helping other people be center of attention. And so, when it's like my turn to be in the spotlight, I'm just like, I feel weird. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to smile or like, talk
I've
anymore.
seen you smile. You know how to smile.
But not like when, people are just like looking at you like expectantly. So I get it. And it's like for me, if, I don't have a job, if I was just like stay at home kind of person, I'm just like, I need a purpose, Yeah.
Well, and I can kind of relate to that too, because now that my kids are both over 18, like this huge chunk of my life, this huge focus of my life is much different.
Right.
It's right. It's not that I obviously, my kids are still really important to me. It's just a different thing. And it's
Right.
weird. It's a weird thing.
Yeah, like they can take care of themselves now. They can do their own grocery shopping. They can drive themselves, right? But they're like becoming more autonomous, and you're just like, okay, how do I fit in now, right? Yeah.
Like the discussion of who is going to actually be home at dinner time is a thing in our house. It's really weird. I also do like that Nesta is a protector too, because she protects the middle sister from the world around her. And also I like that the middle sister sees Farah's love of beauty because she shares it, although she's a gardener. And when she has the chance, she buys Farah paints so that she can decorate the house and things like that. Anyway, you're being very quiet over there, Mirlya. I can't say your name, so just forget about it.
Yes.
You don't have anything to add.
I never liked Farah's family. They are important, but I never liked them.
Wow, it's wild that I had such a different reaction.
I don't know what it was about their characterization. And I think part of it is because you're given such a negative view of Nesta to begin with. And Elaine is just so airheaded that I don't think she's not the sort of character that I like reading about. And her father's just her father, and I feel like her father's just in there for the Beauty and the Beast retelling of the story.
And he's not even he's not even what causes Farah to leave, because in the original story, he's the reason why she has to leave. So all she
Right.
asked for was a rose,
Right.
steals the rose, blah, blah, blah. Yeah.
I did think
Yeah.
it was interesting that he was the one who told her, basically, you go and don't come back. Like, what sort of father says that?
Well, no, but he says it because he's like, there's nothing for you here. That's why you should
Yeah.
go. Because he's like, go be free. Free from all these burdens that you've had. Okay. What do you think of the riddle?
Oh my god. Second dumbest riddle I've ever read in a book.
What was the first? What's in my
In
pocket?
Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, there's a phonetic riddle, and that's the dumbest I've ever read.
I just feel like, she was trying to be too clever. Like the author was trying to be too clever, and it just didn't land. That's it.
When I first
Yeah.
read it, I guess, is this love? This can't be love. That's too dumb. Like, we can't go all this way for that to be love, and then there we were at the end of the book.
I was just like, I didn't even bother to figure it out because it was so nonsensical. But when I got to the end, I'm like, whatever.
But when I first read it, I was again the same. It was like, it's instant, like, it's obviously love. But I wonder whether or not that's one of those. I almost took it as she almost made it intentionally obvious to the reader, but because Feyre is illiterate, she doesn't think that way.
I don't know if I bet.
I feel like she spent a lot of time, Farah spent a lot of time saying she was thinking about the riddle when she wasn't off dancing with Rysand.
There was a
For
lot
that,
of
you know?
I guess
man.
maybe part of it is that Farah didn't know what love was really like. So, okay, if I'm trying really hard to put myself in Farah's shoes and like, why did I not figure this out sooner? Like, does she love her family? Like she has, I think the only real love she probably experienced was maybe from her mom.
Maybe she did though.
I mean, maybe not. I mean, she thinks fondly of her mother, right? So maybe it's that she didn't really experience love, and so it was more of a foreign concept to her.
I mean, yeah, because basically, well, no, I don't think she had some fond memories of her mother, but what kind of mother tells the youngest child, wasn't she like 12? You're in charge of the family now? I
Well,
mean,
because everybody else was useless.
that's still super messed up.
I thought there was a passage where she says something about her mother not being great either. I can't remember
Yeah,
exactly
I'm
it,
pretty
but-
sure there is, that there's
Yeah.
like, she was
Okay,
fine.
well then there you go. She never really experienced love, and so she was not familiar with the concept, and it took a lot of pain and challenge and like near death experiences for her to realize, oh, this is what I'm feeling for Tamlin. It's love. Oh my goodness, it's the answer to the riddle.
As she's being beaten to death.
Yeah, near death experiences.
Actual death experiences.
Well, there you go, too.
Yes, there's that.
I'm gonna go with that.
Yeah, and back in her home village, she has this guy that they just screw around together, but they're not.
Yeah, there's
a
it's
word I
not
can't
like
say buddies.
in love. Yeah. And I guess, she is fairly young. She was like, what, 17?
Something like that, yeah.
So,
So
I'll give her that. I don't know why I'm defending this, but there you go.
there's your defense. Now her fans aren't going to come after you. Who is your favorite character?
Although, actually, no, I can answer this question. For this book, Lucian.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, he's my favorite character. Are we unanimous?
No,
I mean,
Panda's
I
got to be
kinda-
contrarian. I can tell.
No,
She has that look on her face.
I like Elise. The maid lady,
Oh yeah, she's nice.
her
yeah.
handmaiden girl, woman.
I like
Faye.
when Tamlin takes the glamour off Farah. She's like some kind of tree spirit.
Yeah.
She's like, who are you?
Yeah.
was fun.
I like her. I mean, we don't get to meet that many. We just like get mentions of these other Fae characters. So of the ones that we really meet, like Lucian and her are they stand out.
What does it say about the story that none of us picked either main character?
Um,
I did not particularly like Tamlin.
yeah. He didn't ignite a passion in you.
No, there was no passion there between us.
When you read his name, you didn't have fire
No,
flying
there
through
was
your
no
You didn't burn
fire.
for
There was
him.
no. I didn't draw hearts around his name or anything. It was.
You were like, Mr. Anderson Tamlin.
No, not this
What did
time.
you say in the summary? Ignites her burn for him.
See, those are the kinds of phrases that I wasn't supposed to laugh. But when I was like, really?
I don't know. I guess like they were both kind of annoying in their own ways, and I was just like, all right, I know you're the main characters. I know like you're gonna survive this, so I'm just gonna go with it. But to me, it was more interesting the interactions between Farah and Lucian and Elise.
There were times in the book where I did like Feyre. There were times where I didn't. She seems somewhat inconsistent throughout the story.
Yeah.
Tamlin, I was never like on Team Tamlin in this book,
Even though he has Wolverine claws.
even with his Wolverine claws.
Yeah.
And his pretty green eyes. And his luscious blonde hair.
Do you need a moment?
I'm sorry. I just the descriptions are all so over the top.
Yeah. Look, I am not the target audience for this book. Like,
I am.
I accept that. You know, there are some elements of it that like really jive with me, and then there are other elements I'm just like, all right, I am not the target audience. I will give it that, the target audience they probably really enjoy this, and therefore it's fine. Like, it's fine.
I am the target audience. I love
You
fairy
think so?
tale retellings, yeah. And I love a little romance every now and then. Like, I am supposed to love this book. And there are things I love about it. And I want to say that if I had not been reading this to discuss it, because the first time I read it, I'm like, this is fun. This is so much fun. It's not great writing. There's problems with it, but it's so much fun. I loved it the first time.
Yeah.
Reading it the second time, when I knew I was going to have to talk about it, that's when I got my, yeah. And you know what? I am reading this terrible series by this guy named Simon R. Green. And he just writes terrible books, but I love them. As long as I'm going to have to talk about them.
I guess there's a big difference between reading it for fun and then trying
Yeah.
to read it to think
Exactly.
about it. And
I don't know. I just feel like when I think the target audience of this, and this might be a misconception, I just think like younger readers, like people who haven't read as much, like fairy tale retellings, more mature fantasy, like that. To me, that's the target audience. It's more of like a gateway kind of book, but
So this book was originally published as a young adult book, because
Yeah.
back when it was published, the Throne of Glass series was published as a young adult book.
That makes sense.
It should have been classified in that new genre that kind of exists that floats around called new adult,
Mm-hmm.
which is that halfway point somewhere between young adult and adult.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a little spicy. in a
Yeah.
couple
It's
spots.
not full-blown adult fantasy, but it's not young adult either. And
Yeah, and that's kind of the thing is like I think if I read this when I was in my early 20s, I would have really, really enjoyed it. But now I'm just like, it was fun. It was fine. It was not mind-blowing. And it wasn't as, I guess, like spicy as I thought it was going to be. Just like the things that I've heard about her writing, especially like later Throne of Glass books, basically become anyway. So that was a surprise to me, and I was just like reading this. I was like, so where is the spicy romance stuff? Oh, that's it. Okay, all right.
I was certainly expecting it to be a little bit more spicy for sure.
Yeah.
But, I mean, it's not like I wasn't expecting erotica, but I was expecting some more there. I would probably hand it to, 18 and above, just because I'm a prude about stuff like that in books. Like, me recommending, like, I
Yeah.
wouldn't be bothered to see a 16-year-old reading this story or a 15-year-old.
Yeah, I think like early 20s, like if I read this, like I'll be like, okay, this is like written for me.
Right.
I have recommended this book to much, much younger people. I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but it depends on who you are and how you feel about
Like I
relationships
said, I
and
wouldn't, like,
romance.
snatch the book away from them. I just wouldn't personally recommend this book to it.
I think
Does
there
that
is
make
just
sense?
like one scene
There's one scene.
that is quote unquote like problematic.
I wouldn't say problem. It's just a little too much sex that I would not recommend to my niece, shall I say, who is 12.
Well, there's the part which is basically sexual assault, where it was on the fire night, right?
Oh, yeah.
And she doesn't listen, even though she had a run-in where she could have been gang raped. And she was like, no, it's fine. Let me go out again. That was stupid.
Some of her decisions I do not understand at all.
And, you know, she has that run-in with Tamlin. And, you know, it's like she tells him no, but obviously he's under spell, magic influence. And he does that. And then she's like, oh, that's the whole, like, igniting the burn for him part. I'm just like, well,
Isn't she
that's
told to stay in her room?
she was told multiple times.
But
By
she doesn't
multiple
like being
people.
caged.
Yeah,
Also an
she's a free
important
spirit.
characterization. She's a free spirit. She doesn't like being caged.
Yeah, which I mean, like, there's not like being caged, but then there's also stupidity, and she has survival instincts, so that was like counterintuitive.
With that section, I will say nobody told her anything. It just kept saying, "Stay in your room, stay in your room." And I just kept thinking, well, someone at least tell her what's gonna happen, and then like give her a fair warning, say, "Stay in your room because X, Y, Z."
Which the only person that really told her was Rhysand, right? Like, but even after
Then after, yeah.
he told her, she still went out the second time. And to me, I'll chalk it up to, okay, she's being a teenage girl. And at that point, she was already fascinated with Tamlin, and she couldn't stand the thought of him being with another woman.
I think at that point she was that fascinated with Tamlin. I think he was starting to get more fascinated with her, but I don't know that she necessarily had that same level of...
But she had that thought, right? Like, thinking about him with, you know, all these, like, women trying to be the one for the night. And she was like, she did not like that thought.
And see, this is why it was kind of sexual assault, but at the same time, she was very clearly putting herself in the situation where she would be the woman. And she should have realized what that meant. Does that make sense?
Well, kind of, but
I don't even think this is victim blaming. I mean, maybe it's victim blaming. I think it's just she wants his attention on Sexy Fae Night.
Uh-huh.
It's like, what do you think is gonna happen at Sexy Fae Night? Like, they're all just like banging all over the place.
Well, yeah. But, you know, and that, okay, I was gonna say maybe she was more naive, but she herself, like, she's not a virgin. So she knows what sex is, and what lust is. So, yeah, I mean, that whole part, it was just like, I wasn't quite sure what the author was quite trying to portray, but that is a part that felt like fanfic, like this is a fantasy, and she wrote that. So
Goodreads reviews are very divided on that scene. A lot of people are very angry about it, and a lot of people are shouting in all caps, "Bite my neck." So,
Look,
oh my god,
I have no problem with bitings of the necks, but it was a little weird. The whole scene was a little weird.
I mean, he's like a feral kind of. He's an animal. Like, he's got animal attributes, and he was like basically in heat, you know.
Because it was Sexy Fae Night.
Exactly. And she was told to stay in her room.
And this is
until
after
it was over.
She was almost game raped. And then she goes back out.
I
Like,
know.
what if that makes sense? It just doesn't even make sense. It does not make sense. I'm sorry. I don't
know.
hate the scene. I don't hate it. I'm just like, or I don't hate it for any of the reasons that the good reviewers hate it or like it. Like, it's all the other stuff around it. Anyway.
We're just talking about what we think of it.
Yes, that's right. Anyway, any final thoughts? Unless we've been going for about 45 minutes, so.
What do you guys think is going to happen next?
Well, Rhysand basically like owns her for a week of every month, right? Like that was the deal. So something's gonna come of that, and this is where I'm like, okay, there's probably some love triangle gonna happen here. The way that he's set up in this book, that's my guess.
I honestly haven't given any thought to what's gonna happen next. Maybe I'm gonna go with Panda. I think Panda's probably right.
And then there's that whole King of Hybern, right? The dark, whatever,
The
hates
evil
humans.
king from across the sea.
Yeah. I mean, something's gonna happen there. So, whether it's her that defeats him or her associates.
I think she's probably gonna have to confront the families of the fairies she killed at the end of this book. At some point.
See, I do think like this story was a bit darker than I was expecting. There was the whole part where she did kill those innocents, and I had thought that maybe there was like some way to get out of it. But nope, she went ahead and did it. So I do think you're right that there is some sort of consequence that she's gonna have to deal with. And we do get the sense, we do get some of that with her feeling very guilty about it. So I do think there's something more to come from that.
And I actually really appreciated how I thought that particular scene really stuck the landing. Like it was, it could have been cut down by about 7 paragraphs, but other than that.
Yeah. The thing I could really do without is the whole like her being mostly naked and having to dance.
There was a lot of the book devoted to that.
Like,
I mean, when you're
that
talking about
to
fan
me-
fiction, that felt
Yes, exactly. I'm like, okay, all right.
I didn't quite finish the book and I skipped all of those scenes because I was like, I don't care. I don't care.
Is that important later on, Mirlya?
Yes and no.
Oh dear.
It's a bit of a sticking point with some people who are avidly against a certain character.
So,
But yeah, it comes back.
Okay.
That way.
the part with her paint being painted and only Rhysand can touch her without the paint smearing, I can see that coming back.
Okay. But there was one thing that we didn't really talk about is Amarantha's like her backstory and the ring with like was it Julian? Jurian's eyeball, which I was not expecting, but cool, characterization of a villain. I do think that there's more to Amarantha's like backstory that we weren't told, because we were really like told from like, biased characters. So I expect something more to come out of that since the ring did go missing. So maybe Amarantha isn't completely gone, potentially.
I did like that they tried to make it more than just generic evil queen living in dungeon. But I also feel like we didn't get that much time with all of that. That just kind of added there at the end. So I think I had good and bad points. I agree, I don't think we're done with her story, even if the character doesn't come back.
I want to be done with her story. Like, I don't care.
I agree, but I don't think we are.
You know how much longer the sequels are? There's probably like 100 pages devoted more to this in the sequels.
No comment.
Which, speaking of the sequels, like, I am intrigued enough to read at least the second book because I hear that it is better. So I think, Mirlya, is it like a general consensus that it's like the best book within the 3?
I think so.
Yeah.
But it also depends on who you are and which characters you like.
Okay. Fair.
For the most part, the second book is considered the best.
Okay. So I think I will at least read the second book, see how I feel. If I'm like nah, this is worse or whatever, or not good enough to continue, then that's it. But I have a feeling I will like the second book more, even though it's whatever, however many pages longer.
I think I do want to read the next book, but I don't want to read it to review. I just want to, like,
You just want to enjoy it.
I just want to enjoy it because I really did thoroughly enjoy the book, even though I'm sounding very witchy.
Critical. What about you, Mr. Anderson? Will you continue?
Oh, if I had not. So we were just. Panda and I were at a bookstore today, and they had that box set. If I had not seen how big the next book was, I would have said, yeah, sure. But it really is. It almost looks like it's twice the pages, and that seems
Oh,
so
wow.
long for what happened in this book.
Oh,
Now,
no.
maybe it does. If it does get better, if there is more of some stuff and less of other stuff, I can see myself enjoying it. But
Do you want me
it's a
to read
lot of
it first and then tell you?
I don't know.
No, you guys, read it to him.
Here's our bedtime story.
So if this series is technically a trilogy,
Mhm.
but because it got so popular, it has a trilogy followed by a novella,
Mhm.
followed by a spin-off series.
Mhm.
I would. Sorry.
There's only been one of the spin-off series, but again, that's like a 700-page book as well. So, which I read and thought this is 200 pages too long.
Mhm.
I would actually, I don't know how good she is at short stories. I would like to see a collection of short stories based in this world.
Yeah, I would too. I would read that novella.
Right. Like I said when we were interviewing Sebastian, I actually like his collection of greatcoat stories better than the actual novels by a lot. It's not even a
Mhm.
little bit. And I like the novels. So
The
anyway.
novella does come after the trilogy, so you have to finish the trilogy if you want to read the novella.
That's fine. I'll get to it eventually, maybe. After Malazan.
I would think this would be a nice, refreshing thing after Malazan.
I am in the home stretch, so I gotta finish that, man. Like I'm over 50% through the 9th book, and then I'm going straight into that 10th one because I gotta finish that this year.
You're like, I am done with this.
This was a nice break from Malazan, so there's that.
Okay, anything else, guys?
I didn't hate it, so there you go.
I had a couple of points. There was something that I picked up on my read that seems to be I think it's a Sarah J. Maas-ism, where
Yeah.
she's got these phrases that she uses, and I can't think of exactly examples from her other works, but in this one I picked up on a few right at the very start of the book, where when she's listing things, she has a tendency to use "and" a lot.
Mm.
So a couple of quotes that I had was, I pushed against that useless part of my mind, the instincts that had me thinking about colour and shape and light. And then the next one, which was like 20 pages later, was he forgets that humans needed things like food and water and warmth. A little bit later on, there's lovely and strange and colourful things, and low and free and vicious. I feel like this group of 3 words seems to be a thing that she does in all of her books.
I think it's the rhythm. I feel like she is more of she hears a rhythm when she's writing. Sometimes this doesn't quite work out well because to me when I read there's a rhythm because I sub-vocalize when I read, and for me her rhythm is fine. Like it actually makes me read her sentences faster. And then there are some other authors where like their rhythm and my rhythm are off. They don't align. And to me, I'm just like, you ended the sentence too abruptly. It's hard to get into the momentum of reading. Novik is the main one that I have trouble with. But yeah, I think you're right. That is just a style that she likes. And Lil Red, did you listen to this via audiobook?
Yep.
How's the audiobook?
It's pretty good. But
Yeah.
let me think. Yeah, I think there is a definite rhythm to her writing, but maybe I just don't mesh with it because it bothered me in places, which I've said in several different ways.
Yeah.
Sorry.
That's
Sorry,
fine.
fans.
Did you have other points, Mirlya?
No, that was it. Without trying to spoil anything.
You so badly want to spoil us, I can tell.
Would you want to do an episode on the rest of the series? Or like an episode per?
I wouldn't mind. I mean, I think that the books are big enough that they could have their own episode. And
Yeah.
a lot does happen in the second book that I think is worth talking about.
Okay. I'd be down. It sounds like Mr. Anderson is on the fence and Little Red's like, nope.
I don't like being mean about books. And I feel like it was really mean. And
Who knows? You may just love the second one and you'll be like, this is 5 stars.
okay,
And
so
you're just
if
going to be
I
like,
read the second one
I
and
want to
that's my
talk
reaction,
about it.
then I can resend. But at this moment in time, no, thank you. I want to read it without having to think about reviewing it because you guys, I really want you to understand. I really enjoyed this book. On enjoyment level for me personally, it was a 5. I'm dead serious, but it is not a 5 book. It is just
Even
not.
with the riddle.
That was fine. I was like, whatever. It was a thing that happened in the book.
It was a thing for sure.
I mean, I understand that. This is the sort of book I really enjoyed it, but it's not the sort of book that I would recommend to every person who I walk past.
I
Yeah.
agree.
Who would you recommend this to?
Probably a younger audience, like you were saying. People who are in that zone where they don't want a full blown fantasy book. They don't mind the romance. So any romantasy readers, I would recommend it to. Anyone who isn't particularly a fantasy reader either, but doesn't mind the romance side of things. Because it's a romance, it's kind of a romance at its heart, but it's also an epic fantasy.
Mm-hmm.
So it captures the two quite well together. So you've got your typical happily ever after at the end of book 1.
Isn't that the point of romance, though? You get the happily ever after. That's why we read romance.
Yeah, but it also has a lot more going on with
Yes,
it from a fantasy standpoint and from a plot standpoint.
I mean, I think the thing is that romance, yes, there is the romance genre, right? But then there's also a romance element. And romance genre and romance element are not the same thing. So, like a romance genre, what people typically think of are those like, sexy shirtless men on the
Dude,
covers.
where's my shirt?
What?
Dude, where's my shirt?
Yes, dude, where's my shirt? That kind of stuff. And it's like very, like more like pining kind of thing. And then there's like books with romance elements. And like that's the thing is romance is such a broad spectrum. Different people like different kinds of romance. There's not just one kind of romance.
I believe we have an episode on this, don't we, Panda?
We do, which people should listen to if they would like. And that's why it's kind of hard when it's like people say, oh, but I like romance. I like fantasy. And I'm like, yeah, but I don't think you're the audience for this kind of romance fantasy, right? Because there are elements of it that are just like, if you are looking for like really strong characterization and really strong motivation and logic and like a lot more complexity and bigger world building and all of that. It's like, this is not that. To me, this is not that. This is somewhere in the middle, and the audience for it is more like, tends to be younger. And you just want a quick read with some spicy.
I think that's also why this series has become such a big household name, because it isn't too heavily fantasy. So people who don't normally read fantasy quite happily read it and enjoy it. Because it doesn't have that big world building complex characters, 10 different characters that you need to learn about, or maybe more.
So I think because I would say it's 100% fantasy. It's just not.
Epic.
It's not what people think of as fantasy that aren't fantasy readers. It is 100% a fairy tale retelling.
Yes.
And fairy tales are very much part of fantasy.
Yes.
Where fantasy draws a lot of their stories from. But I would give it to somebody who likes fairy tales because that's what this is. And so I'm like, you like fairy tales? Here's a book. There's a couple sexy scenes. Just a heads up.
Yeah. And I mean, that's the other thing is like, the main character is a younger female, and that's the perspective that you are going to get. And if you don't really like reading that perspective, then you're probably not going to like this book.
I mean, but that's most fairy tales. They're younger people. Don't you think?
Yeah,
Yeah. So I think we have done an episode.
I think so.
So thank you so much for joining us. Please consider supporting the Legendarium on Patreon. Thanks, Greg, for loaning us a little corner of your media empire and Horizon Brave, fighting it all. For Mirlya, whose name I can't pronounce ever, sorry, Befuddled Panda, and Mr. Anderson, I'm Little Red Book. Good night, y'all.
Bye.
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 I am quite surprised that Combat Wombat gave it a 4.
Did he
I know
really?
he said it was a little lower than a 4, but he rounded up, and I'm just a little surprised.
I thought that was fun, actually. I was just like, whoa, that's a high rating.
Yeah.
Well, Kieran is a huge romance fan. He won't admit it, but he totally will.
I'm surprised because Chesky's read book 1, but he hasn't read on.
Yeah.
And he doesn't know whether he wants to read on or not.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it's a book he doesn't like?
Oh, it's not that he doesn't like it. I think he's just, he didn't love it enough to go, I want to read more.
So I just
Yeah.
read...
Oh, go ahead.
I just read Spellslinger, which is Sebastian de Castell's first series, and I liked it much better than Greatcoats, actually.
Oh, interesting, because that's his YA series.
Yeah.
I listened to book 1 of that series. It was different.
It was different.
In a good way?
It was like I was expecting something that didn't happen.
Oh.
I don't know. I felt a little disappointed by the whole magic thing. I mean, that was the point. The whole magic thing was kind of the point of the book, but...
Mm-hmm. I see.
It's really hard recommending books or rating books just because, everybody has such a different palette, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
But when I give stars, I try and think about if the plot works and if the writing works, and not whether or not I enjoyed it. And there was this book I read.
I rate it based on my enjoyment.
Yeah, I don't remember. I think it was with Soul and Chesky. It was some book, and I'm like, this is a 2.5. I love this book, but it's not good. Not a good book. I love it anyway. But you know what? I'm a big fan of sometimes it's fine to read just dime store novels. It's fine.
Yeah.
Not everything has to be Shakespeare.
Yeah, and that's what the majority of people like reading anyway.
For sure.